Fear spreads faster than truth. Always has. One scared person can infect an entire room without saying more than a few words. One rumor can destroy years of trust overnight. One negative thought repeated enough times can become a prison inside somebody's mind. That's the world we live in. People don't react to reality anymore. They react to panic. And panic is loud. Truth is usually calm. Truth takes time. Truth waits for evidence. Fear kicks down the door screaming. That's why entire communities fall apart the moment uncertainty appears. Nobody pauses to think. Nobody slows down long enough to understand what's really happening. They just run with emotion because emotion spreads faster than logic ever will. Look around. One person says, "Everything's falling apart." And suddenly everybody starts acting like the sky is collapsing. People lose sleep over things that haven't even happened yet. They destroy relationships because of assumptions. They sabotage opportunities because of fear of failure before the first step is even taken. Fear doesn't need proof. That's what makes it dangerous. Fear survives on imagination. And the human mind, when left uncontrolled, becomes a factory producing worst-case scenarios every second of the day. You know what's terrifying? Most people don't even realize they're addicted to negativity. They wake up searching for problems. They scroll through bad news for hours. They replay old betrayals in their heads like broken movies. They expect disappointment before life even gives them a chance. Then they wonder why happiness feels so far away, because fear has been sitting on the throne of their mind for too long. See, fear changes people. A fearful person stops trusting, stops dreaming, stops taking risks, stops believing in themselves. Eventually they become a smaller version of who they were meant to be, and society encourages it. People are rewarded for panic now. The loudest fears get the most attention. The angriest voices dominate every room. The most negative opinions spread the fastest because negativity is emotionally addictive. Misery loves company. A peaceful mind threatens chaotic people because your calm exposes their weakness. That's why when someone stays hopeful during hard times, others call them delusional. When someone remains focused while everybody else panics, they become a target. When someone refuses to drown in negativity, insecure people try to drag them back into darkness. Because fear wants obedience. Fear wants everybody shaking together. But the moment you stop feeding it, fear begins starving. Understand this carefully. Not every thought deserves your belief. Just because your mind says something scary doesn't make it true. Your brain can lie to you when it's wounded. Pain distorts perception. Trauma distorts perception. Failure distorts perception. Suddenly you start believing, "I'm not enough. Nothing will ever improve. People can't be trusted. I'll probably fail anyway." And if those thoughts repeat long enough, they start sounding like fear and start sounding like facts. That's how negativity takes control, quietly, not through one massive collapse, but through tiny, repeated thoughts poisoning your confidence day after day. Most people never fight back. They decorate their suffering. They build identities around pain. They introduce themselves through their wounds instead of their strength. But there comes a moment in life where you must decide, will you control your mind, or will fear control it for you? Because if you don't consciously choose your thoughts, the world will choose them for you. And the world profits from your fear. Fearful people are easier to manipulate, easier to distract, easier to control. A person who believes in themselves becomes dangerous because they stop begging for permission to live fully. That's why overcoming negative feelings is more than emotional survival. It's rebellion. It's standing in the middle of chaos and refusing to surrender your peace. Not because life becomes easy, not because pain disappears, but because you finally understand something powerful fear predicts. Truth observes. Fear screams. Doomed truth asks, what actually happened? Fear says, everybody hates you. Truth says, not everybody. Fear says, you'll fail. Truth says, you haven't even tried yet. See the difference. Truth stays grounded. Fear runs wild. And when fear takes over a community, people stop thinking clearly. They become reactive instead of intentional. They attack each other, blame each other, distrust each other. Everybody becomes emotionally infected. One anxious person creates 10 more anxious people. That's why protecting your mental environment matters so much. Some conversations poison you. Some people drain you. Some environments feed hopelessness until your spirit starts collapsing silently. Energy is contagious. Spend enough time around fearful minds, and eventually you'll start seeing the world through cracked glass too. That's why strong people guard their peace carefully. Not because they're weak, because they understand how easily negativity multiplies. You cannot heal in environments constantly teaching you to hate yourself, and maybe that's been your battle. Maybe you've spent years surrounded by doubt, years hearing criticism louder than encouragement, years carrying anxiety nobody else understood. But listen carefully, fear is learned, which means it can also be unlearned. You do not have to obey every dark thought entering your mind. You can challenge it, question it, replace it. That's real strength. Not pretending you never feel fear. Everybody feels fear. Real strength is moving forward while fear is screaming in your ear. Real strength is choosing peace when panic would be easier. Real strength is refusing to let temporary emotions make permanent decisions. Because feelings change, storms pass, pain evolves. But if fear controls your life long enough, it steals years you can never recover. How many dreams died because somebody listened to fear? How many relationships collapsed because people assumed the worst? How many talented people stayed invisible because they feared judgment? Fear has destroyed more potential than failure ever could. At least failure teaches. Fear only cages. And the saddest part, most cages don't even have locks. People stay trapped because they became comfortable with limitation, comfortable with negativity, comfortable expecting disaster. But you were not created to live emotionally imprisoned. You were not born just to survive panic after panic until life ends. You were meant to think beyond fear, to become calm while others collapse, focused while others panic, clear-minded while others lose themselves in emotional chaos. That's rare now, and rare things become powerful. So when the whole community starts panicking, breathe, slow down, observe, question everything fear tells you, because fear spreads faster than truth, but truth lasts longer, always. Your mind becomes what you feed it. Most people don't realize that. They think their thoughts appear out of nowhere. They think their anxiety is random. Their anger is random. Their hopelessness is random. But nothing grows without being fed nothing. If you feed your body poison every single day, eventually your body collapses. Everybody understands that. But when it comes to the mind, people suddenly act surprised when negativity destroys their peace. You cannot spend hours consuming fear, hate, comparison, fake lifestyles, toxic opinions, and endless chaos, then expect your mind to remain healthy. That's impossible. The human mind is like soil. Whatever you plant repeatedly grows. Feed it fear, and fear becomes your personality. Feed it anger, and anger becomes your language. Feed it insecurity, and insecurity becomes your identity. Then one day you wake up wondering why you feel empty. But emptiness didn't appear overnight. It was built slowly, thought by thought, habit by habit, voice by voice. See, people are extremely careful about what enters their homes. They lock doors, install cameras, protect their valuables, but they allow anything to enter their minds, any opinion, any negativity, any toxic influence, and then they wonder why they no longer recognize themselves. Your mind is the most valuable territory you own. Once negativity settles there long enough, it starts rewriting reality. Suddenly you stop seeing opportunities. You only see obstacles. You stop seeing lessons. You only see suffering. You stop seeing your worth. You only see flaws. That's what happens when the mind is starved of hope and overloaded with poison. And the worst part, negative thinking feels intelligent sometimes. People mistake pessimism for wisdom. They think expecting the worst makes them prepared. It doesn't. It just makes them exhausted before life even begins. There are people destroying their future right now over situations that don't even exist yet. Their mind has become addicted to disaster. Every day they rehearse failure. Every day they imagine rejection. Every day they convince themselves something terrible is coming. Then eventually the body starts obeying the mind. Stress increases. Sleep disappears. Confidence weakens. Joy fades. Because the body listens to what the mind repeats. That's why words matter. The conversations around you matter. The music you absorb matters. The content you watch matters. The people you spend time with matter. Energy transfers. Spend enough time around bitterness, and eventually your spirit starts speaking the same language. Spend enough time around people who hate life, and eventually life begins looking meaningless to you too. That's why protecting your mental environment is not selfish. It's survival. Some people drain your soul every time they speak. They complain constantly, judge constantly, panic constantly. Everywhere they go, they spread emotional pollution. And if you stay around it too long, your mind starts adapting to dysfunction as if dysfunction is normal. That's dangerous, because once negativity becomes normal, peace starts feeling unfamiliar. Some people have lived in chaos so long they no longer know how to function without it. Silence makes them uncomfortable. Happiness feels suspicious. Stability feels boring. Why? Because the mind becomes conditioned by what it repeatedly experiences. If your entire life is built around fear, drama, and negativity, calmness feels unnatural. But healing begins the moment you become intentional about what you feed your mind. You have to start asking yourself, what am I consuming every day? What voices am I allowing into my head? Who benefits from my insecurity? Because not everything deserves your attention. Some information exists only to make you anxious. Some people only speak to spread misery. Some environments only survive by keeping everybody emotionally weak, and weak minds are easy to control. That's why the strongest thing you can do is think independently, not emotionally, not impulsively, intentionally. You must learn to pause before accepting negativity as truth. Just because someone criticizes you doesn't mean they're right. Just because you failed once doesn't mean you're doomed. Just because life hurts right now doesn't mean joy is gone forever. But fear feeds on repetition. If you hear something negative about yourself long enough, eventually you start believing it. That's why many people are fighting battles they didn't even create. They inherited fears from broken environments. They inherited insecurity from constant criticism. They inherited self-hatred from years of emotional damage. And now their inner voice sounds more like their enemies than themselves. That's heartbreaking. A person can survive almost anything physically, but mentally. Once the mind turns against itself, life becomes heavy. Every task feels harder. Every dream feels impossible. Every setback feels personal. Because the mind interprets reality based on what it has been fed. Feed your mind hopelessness, and eventually even beautiful moments feel empty. But here's the powerful truth. The same mind that was trained into negativity can also be retrained into strength. Your brain adapts. That means you can rebuild. You can feed your mind discipline instead of excuses. Truth instead of fear. Growth instead of victimhood. Purpose instead of distraction. And slowly, your reality changes. Not instantly, because healing isn't instant. Years of negativity don't disappear overnight. But little by little, the darkness weakens. You begin thinking clearer, breathing easier, believing again. And suddenly you realize something important: peace was never missing. It was buried underneath mental noise. Most people are overstimulated and emotionally starving at the same time. Constant entertainment, constant comparison. Constant noise, but no reflection, no stillness, no self-awareness. So their mind keeps consuming junk until it becomes mentally sick. You can't feed your brain chaos every day and expect clarity. That's like pouring poison into a river and praying for clean water. Eventually, contamination spreads everywhere. Your thoughts become contaminated. Your confidence becomes contaminated. Your relationships become contaminated. Because what enters the mind eventually enters behavior. That's why disciplined people protect their attention fiercely. Attention is power. Whatever controls your attention controls your direction in life. If negativity owns your focus, negativity shapes your future. But if you consciously feed your mind strength, wisdom, resilience, and purpose, eventually your inner world transforms. And when your inner world changes, the outside world starts changing too. Not because life suddenly becomes easy, but because your perspective becomes stronger than your circumstances. That is real transformation. Not pretending pain doesn't exist. Not fake positivity. Real transformation is learning how to starve the darkness instead of feeding it every single day. Because your mind is always becoming something. The only question is, what are you feeding it? Pain can either destroy you or build you. There is no middle ground. The same fire that melts glass can forge steel. The same storm that uproots weak trees makes deep roots stronger. Pain works the same way. Some people walk through suffering and become colder, angrier, more broken. Others walk through the exact same darkness and emerge wiser, stronger, almost impossible to shake. What's the difference? Choice. Not the pain itself, not the circumstances, not luck. The decision made after the damage. See, pain changes everyone. That part is unavoidable. Nobody escapes life untouched. At some point, life hits hard enough to silence you. Hard enough to make you question yourself. Hard enough to leave scars nobody else can see. Maybe betrayal broke you. Maybe failure humiliated you. Maybe loneliness slowly crushed your spirit in silence. Everybody carries something. The problem is most people never heal correctly. They survive the pain physically, but mentally they remain trapped inside the moment that hurt them. Years pass, but emotionally, they're still standing in the same darkness. Still angry, still afraid, still replaying old wounds like a movie they cannot stop watching. That's how pain destroys people. Not instantly. Slowly, quietly. It poisons their trust, poisons their confidence, poisons the way they see the world. Eventually, pain becomes their identity. And once suffering becomes identity, healing feels dangerous because pain is the only thing that feels familiar anymore. That's why some people push away love, push away opportunities, push away happiness, not because they hate peace, because pain trained them to expect disaster. Understand this carefully. Unhealed pain changes your personality. A betrayed person becomes suspicious. A humiliated person becomes insecure. An abandoned person becomes emotionally guarded. And if those wounds remain untreated long enough, they begin controlling decisions without you realizing it. Suddenly, you sabotage relationships before people can hurt you. You quit dreams before failure can embarrass you. You isolate yourself because loneliness feels safer than disappointment. That's pain in control. And pain in control destroys futures. But pain also contains power. That's the part nobody talks about enough. Pain reveals things comfort never could. Comfort hides weakness. Pain exposes it. Comfort keeps people asleep. Pain wakes them up. Some of the strongest people alive were created in moments that nearly broke them completely. Because suffering forces self-awareness. When everything falls apart, masks fall too. You discover who truly cares. You discover what truly matters. You discover how strong you actually are. Pressure reveals character. Anybody can smile when life is easy. Anybody can act confident when nothing is at risk. But who are you when everything collapses? That's the real test. Pain introduces you to yourself. Not the version created for social approval. Not the fake image built for attention. The real you. The part hidden underneath comfort and distraction. And sometimes what you discover is ugly. Maybe you realize how much fear controls you, how much anger controls you, how much insecurity has shaped your decisions for years. Good. Awareness is painful, but awareness is where transformation begins. Because you cannot heal what you refuse to confront. Most people spend their lives escaping pain instead of learning from it. They numb themselves constantly. Distraction, entertainment, addictions, noise. Anything to avoid sitting alone with their thoughts. But avoided pain never disappears. It waits. It leaks into relationships, leaks into behavior, leaks into self-worth. Soon the person doesn't even understand why they feel empty anymore. That's because ignored pain becomes emotional poison. But the moment you stop running, everything changes. Healing begins when you face the darkness directly. When you admit, yes, this hurt me. Yes, this changed me. Yes, I've been broken. There is strength in honesty. Pretending you're unaffected doesn't make you strong. It makes you emotionally disconnected. Real strength is confronting suffering without letting it turn you cruel. That's rare. Very rare, because pain tempts people to become what hurt them. Hurt people often hurt others because suffering wants company. A person betrayed becomes manipulative. A person rejected becomes emotionally cold. A person humiliated begins humiliating others. The cycle continues, unless somebody decides to stop it. That's what growth is. Growth is choosing wisdom over bitterness. Growth is refusing to let pain transform you into a monster. And that choice is difficult, because bitterness feels powerful temporarily. Anger creates the illusion of control. But eventually bitterness consumes the person carrying it. Holding hatred is like drinking poison and expecting somebody else to collapse. Pain should teach you strength, not steal your humanity. And sometimes your greatest transformation begins after your greatest collapse. Because destruction creates space for rebuilding. The old version of you breaks apart, the naive version, the weak version, the version addicted to approval. Then slowly something stronger begins forming. You stop needing validation from people who never valued you. You stop fearing rejection because rejection already survived you. You stop panicking over failure because failure taught you resilience. Pain sharpens awareness. It forces maturity. Suddenly small problems no longer shake you because you've already survived bigger storms. That's why people who've truly suffered often become calmer. Not weaker, calmer, because pain teaches perspective. After enough darkness, you stop wasting energy on meaningless things. You realize how fragile life is, how temporary emotions are, how valuable peace becomes. And eventually you understand your scars are proof you survived something that tried to destroy you. That matters. You are still here, even after heartbreak, even after betrayal, even after nights nobody knew you were suffering. You survived. Never underestimate that. Some battles leave no visible wounds, yet they change a person forever. And maybe right now you feel exhausted. Maybe life hit harder than expected. Maybe you feel emotionally drained from carrying invisible pain for too long. But listen carefully. Pain is not your final form, it's a chapter. A brutal one maybe, a lonely one maybe, but still a chapter. Do not build your permanent identity around temporary suffering. Because the same pain trying to destroy you today may become the reason you grow tomorrow. One day the thing that almost broke you may become the thing that awakened you. That's how transformation works. Not through comfort, through fire. And yes, fire burns, but it also purifies. So when pain enters your life, you have two choices: let it harden your heart or strengthen your soul. Let it destroy your future or build a version of you that fear can no longer control. Because pain will change you either way. The only question is, what will you become after it's finished with you? Stop waiting for people to understand you. Most never will. And the moment you finally accept that, your life changes. See, one of the biggest emotional prisons people live in is the desperate need to be understood by everybody around them. They explain themselves constantly, defend themselves constantly, seek approval constantly, as if peace only arrives after the world finally says, "Okay, now we get you." But what if they never do? What if the people around you are only capable of understanding life from their own limited perspective? That's the truth most people avoid. Not everybody has the emotional depth to understand your struggle. Not everybody has suffered enough to recognize your pain. Not everybody has the vision to see your purpose before it becomes visible. And that's okay. But people destroy themselves trying to force understanding from those committed to misunderstanding them. That's exhausting. You explain your intentions. They twist your words. You show loyalty. They question your motives. You speak honestly. They call you difficult. Eventually, you start shrinking yourself just to make other people comfortable. That's dangerous. Because once you begin living for approval, you slowly lose connection with who you really are. You start editing your personality, hiding your emotions, suppressing your ideas. Not because you're fake, because rejection terrifies you, and rejection hurts deeply when your identity depends on acceptance. That's why so many people are emotionally trapped. Their happiness is controlled by opinions they cannot control. One compliment makes them feel worthy. One criticism destroys their confidence. That's not peace. That's emotional slavery, and social approval is one of the most addictive drugs in the world. People sacrifice authenticity just to avoid judgment. They laugh when they're hurting, agree when they disagree, pretend when they're exhausted. Why? Because humans fear isolation. Deep down, most people would rather betray themselves than risk being misunderstood by the crowd. But greatness has always looked strange in the beginning. Every person who thought differently was criticized first. Every person who refused to follow the crowd became a target. Why? Because people fear what they don't understand, and insecure people attack what reminds them of their own limitations. That's why the moment you start changing, some people become uncomfortable. The moment you stop tolerating disrespect, they call you arrogant. The moment you become focused, they call you obsessed. The moment you protect your peace, they accuse you of changing. Of course you changed. Pain changed you. Experience changed you. Reality changed you. Growth always changes people. But the world prefers predictable versions of you because predictable people are easier to control. The moment you begin thinking independently, people panic, especially those who benefited from your insecurity. See, some people only liked you when you were easier to manipulate, easier to silence, easier to guilt. The stronger you become mentally, the more resistance you attract. That's part of the process. People often misunderstand what they secretly envy. A person trapped in fear will criticize courage. A person trapped in mediocrity will mock ambition. A person uncomfortable with themselves will feel threatened by somebody becoming confident. So stop taking every misunderstanding personally. Sometimes people judge you based on wounds they never healed themselves. Sometimes they project their fears onto your life. And sometimes they simply cannot see what you see. That doesn't mean your vision is wrong. Imagine explaining mountains to people who have only known caves. Your growth becomes offensive to those committed to staying small. That's why waiting for universal understanding is a losing battle. No matter what you do, somebody will misunderstand you. If you stay quiet, they'll call you weak. If you speak loudly, they'll call you aggressive. If you chase success, they'll say you changed. If you stay struggling, they'll say you lacked ambition. People will always create stories because judgment is easier than understanding. And honestly, most people don't even understand themselves, yet somehow they believe they fully understand you after a few moments, a few mistakes, or a few rumors. That's absurd. A human being is more complicated than public opinion. You are more than your worst moment, more than your failures, more than the labels others place on you. But when you spend too much time trying to correct everybody's perception, you lose energy needed to build your actual life. You cannot heal while constantly defending your existence. Sometimes silence is stronger than explanation. Not everybody deserves access to your inner world. Some people ask questions only to judge your answers. Some people pretend to care while secretly waiting for you to fail. That's why maturity teaches you something powerful: protect your energy. Not every misunderstanding needs correction. Not every opinion deserves response. Not every critic deserves your attention. Because confidence is not proving yourself to everybody. Confidence is remaining yourself even when misunderstood. That's rare, especially in a world addicted to validation. Social media made it worse. Now people measure worth through attention, through likes, through applause. They build entire identities around being accepted by strangers. And the terrifying part: the crowd changes constantly. One day they praise you. The next day they destroy you. If your identity depends on public approval, your peace will never survive. Because crowds are emotional. Crowds panic. Crowds judge quickly. Crowds follow trends instead of truth. That's why strong people learn to stand alone mentally. Not because they hate people. Because they understand something important. The crowd is often wrong before it is right. History proves it. People mocked dreamers before admiring them, rejected visionaries before celebrating them, laughed at outsiders before following them. Why? Because humans naturally resist what challenges their comfort zones. So if people misunderstand you during your growth, don't panic. You are not here to fit every expectation. You are not alive just to become digestible for people who refuse to think deeply. And maybe the hardest lesson of all is realizing that some people will only understand you after success makes your journey undeniable. Before success, they question you. After success, they claim they believed in you all along. That's human nature. But if you wait for permission before becoming yourself, You'll spend your whole life emotionally chained to other people's opinions. Freedom begins when you stop begging to be understood. You stop over-explaining. Stop shrinking yourself. Stop apologizing for evolving. And suddenly something powerful happens. You become peaceful. Not because everybody supports you, but because their misunderstanding no longer controls your identity. You realize that your purpose is bigger than public approval. Some journeys are meant to be walked without applause. Some transformations happen in isolation, and some people will never understand your path because they were never meant to walk it with you. That's okay. Keep moving anyway. Control the chaos inside you. Because if you don't, the chaos will control you. Most people think their biggest enemy is somewhere outside themselves. Bad people, bad luck, bad situations. But the most dangerous battles are usually invisible. The war inside your own mind. That's where lives are truly destroyed. Not by one catastrophic moment, but by internal chaos left unmanaged for too long. Uncontrolled anger, uncontrolled fear, uncontrolled insecurity, uncontrolled overthinking. Little by little, those emotions begin steering your life like a reckless driver speeding toward destruction. And the terrifying part, most people don't even realize it's happening. They think emotional reactions are personality traits instead of warning signs.
I'm just angry.
I'm just anxious. I'm just stressed. No, you are emotionally overloaded. And when inner chaos becomes normal, peace starts feeling unnatural. That's why some people cannot sit alone in silence anymore. Silence forces confrontation, no distractions, no entertainment, no noise, just you and everything you've been avoiding. That scares people, because deep down many are carrying storms they never learned how to calm. See, emotions themselves are not the enemy. Anger isn't evil. Fear isn't evil. Sadness isn't evil. The danger begins when emotions become your master instead of your messenger. Anger is supposed to inform you, not control your behavior. Fear is supposed to warn you, not imprison your future. Sadness is supposed to pass through you, not become your identity. But when inner chaos takes control, emotions stop being temporary visitors and start becoming permanent rulers. That's when destruction begins. A person consumed by anger ruins relationships in seconds. A person consumed by fear destroys opportunities before they begin. A person consumed by insecurity sabotages their own happiness constantly. And afterward, regret arrives. Because emotional decisions often create permanent consequences from temporary feelings. One moment of uncontrolled rage can destroy years of trust. One impulsive decision can alter an entire future. That's why emotional discipline is power. Not muscles, not money, not status, control. Real strength is remaining calm when chaos invites you to lose yourself. Anybody can explode emotionally. Anybody can scream. Anybody can collapse under pressure. But staying composed while your mind is at war with itself, that's rare. And rare things become powerful. The world glorifies external strength, but ignores internal mastery. People admire loud confidence while silently drowning in anxiety themselves. But confidence without inner control is fragile. Eventually, pressure exposes everything hidden underneath. That's why some people look successful on the outside, but are collapsing internally. They cannot sleep peacefully, cannot think clearly, cannot sit with their own thoughts without feeling overwhelmed. Because inner chaos never disappears through avoidance. It grows. Ignored emotions don't vanish. They accumulate. Every suppressed betrayal, every unresolved insecurity, every hidden fear. Eventually, the mind becomes overcrowded with emotional noise. And when the mind becomes noisy, clarity disappears. Suddenly, everything feels heavier than it actually is. Small problems become disasters. Minor criticism feels like personal attacks. Temporary setbacks feel permanent, because chaos distorts perspective. An emotionally unstable mind cannot interpret reality clearly. That's why controlling your inner world matters so much. You cannot create a peaceful life while carrying constant war inside yourself. And maybe nobody taught you emotional control growing up. Most people inherit emotional dysfunction. They learned chaos from chaotic environments. Maybe anger was normal in your house. Maybe fear was constant. Maybe emotional suppression was treated like strength. So now you're carrying patterns that were never truly yours to begin with. That happens. But eventually adulthood forces responsibility. You cannot keep blaming your past forever while allowing chaos to destroy your future. Healing becomes your responsibility. Not because what happened was fair, because your future depends on it. And healing starts with awareness. You must learn to observe your emotions without immediately obeying them. That changes everything. Instead of becoming anger, you observe anger. Instead of becoming anxiety, you observe anxiety. There's power in that separation. Because the moment you can observe an emotion, you stop becoming fully controlled by it. Most people react instantly. Something hurts them, they explode. Something scares them, they run. Something triggers insecurity, they self-destruct emotionally. That's survival mode. But survival mode is exhausting. Eventually, you must evolve beyond emotional impulsiveness. You must become conscious of your own mind. Ask yourself, why does this trigger me? Why does criticism hurt so deeply? Why do I fear rejection so much? Why do I keep sabotaging my peace? Those questions matter, because unexamined chaos repeats itself endlessly. And often the biggest battle isn't external circumstances. It's the stories you keep telling yourself internally.
I'm not enough.
I'll never succeed. People always leave. Nothing ever changes. Repeat those thoughts long enough and your nervous system begins treating fear like reality. That's why inner dialogue matters so much. Your mind is listening to everything you say to yourself. And if your inner voice constantly attacks you, eventually your spirit weakens. No enemy can destroy somebody faster than their own uncontrolled mind. That's why discipline begins internally first. Control your thoughts before they control your behavior, because every action starts as a thought. A peaceful mind creates better decisions. A chaotic mind creates emotional destruction. And understand this: controlling chaos does not mean becoming emotionless. It means emotions no longer dictate your direction. You still feel pain, still feel fear, still feel anger, but you stop surrendering your identity to those emotions. That's maturity. A mature person understands feelings are temporary. Storms pass. But emotionally reactive people treat every feeling like an emergency. That's why their life becomes unstable. Everything shakes them. Everything triggers them. Everything becomes dramatic because internal chaos magnifies reality constantly. But calm people think differently. They pause before reacting, breathe before speaking, reflect before deciding. That pause changes lives, because in that pause, wisdom has room to enter. Without pause, chaos wins automatically. And maybe that's your challenge right now. Maybe your biggest battle isn't the outside world. It's your own thoughts, the overthinking, the anxiety, the anger nobody sees, the exhaustion of fighting invisible battles every day. But listen carefully. Chaos inside you does not make you weak. Staying unconscious of it does. Awareness is where strength begins. The moment you acknowledge your inner war, you gain the ability to fight it differently. And slowly, with discipline, honesty, and self-awareness, the noise begins fading, not instantly, but gradually. You stop reacting to everything. Stop giving emotions complete control. Stop letting temporary darkness define your identity. And one day you realize something powerful. The world around you became calmer because the world inside you finally did too. That is real power. Not controlling others, controlling yourself. Become the calm in a panicking world. Because panic is everywhere now. People panic over opinions, panic over rumors, panic over failure, panic over uncertainty. The world moves so fast that most minds never truly rest anymore. Everybody is reacting. Everybody is emotionally overwhelmed. Everybody is screaming over each other while very few are actually thinking clearly. And in the middle of all that noise, a calmness becomes rare enough to feel almost dangerous. See, panic spreads like wildfire. One fearful voice creates 10 more fearful voices. One negative headline destroys thousands of peaceful thoughts. One emotional reaction can infect an entire room. That's why the modern world feels exhausted. People are carrying emotional tension every single day without even realizing it. Constant stress, constant comparison, constant uncertainty. The nervous system never relaxes. And when people live in constant panic, they stop making wise decisions. Fear takes over logic. Emotion replaces clarity. Reaction replaces reflection. That's when destruction begins. A panicking person says things they regret, makes choices they shouldn't, destroys opportunities they never truly examined. Because panic creates tunnel vision. When fear controls the mind, everything starts looking like danger. And honestly, many people have become addicted to emotional chaos. Silence makes them uncomfortable. Stillness feels unfamiliar. Peace feels boring. So they unconsciously create drama just to feel emotionally stimulated again. That's tragic, because chaos drains the soul. The human mind was not designed to live under constant emotional pressure. Eventually something breaks. Sleep breaks. Focus breaks. Relationships break. Confidence breaks. And yet most people continue feeding panic every single day. They wake up consuming negativity immediately, scroll through fear constantly, absorb anxiety from everyone around them, then wonder why their mind feels heavy. Your environment affects your emotional state more than you realize. Spend enough time around panic, and eventually your nervous system begins copying it. That's why emotionally calm people stand out so much. They move differently. While everybody else rushes, they pause. While everybody else reacts, they observe. While everybody else collapses emotionally, they remain grounded. That's power, not loud power. Controlled power. The kind that doesn't need to scream to prove strength. Because true calmness is not weakness, it's mastery. Anybody can lose control. Anybody can panic under pressure. But staying centered while life becomes chaotic, that requires discipline. Calm people are not people without problems. They simply learn something others have in emotions are temporary visitors, not permanent leaders. A calm person still feels fear, still feels pain, still feels uncertainty, but they don't allow those emotions to hijack their entire identity. That changes everything. Because once emotions stop controlling you, external chaos loses power over your mind. And the world desperately needs more people like that. People capable of thinking clearly under pressure. People capable of remaining kind while others become cruel. People capable of creating stability in emotionally unstable environments. See, calmness is contagious too. One grounded person can calm an entire room. Have you ever noticed that? In moments of crisis, everybody instinctively looks toward the calmest person present. Because calmness creates trust. Panic creates confusion. That's why emotional discipline matters so much. Not just for you, for everyone around you. Your energy affects people more than you realize. If you constantly carry chaos internally, eventually it spreads outward. Your stress touches relationships. Your fear influences conversations. Your emotional instability affects decisions. But when you become calm internally, you become a place of stability in a world addicted to panic. And stability is rare now. The modern world rewards outrage. The loudest reactions get attention. The most emotional voices dominate conversations. But wisdom rarely screams. Wisdom observes first. That's why calm people often appear mysterious. They are not controlled by every temporary emotion passing through them. They think before speaking, reflect before reacting, breathe before deciding. That pause changes lives. Most destruction happens in moments of emotional impulsiveness. One angry sentence, one fearful decision, one impulsive reaction, and suddenly years of progress collapse. But calmness creates space between emotion and action. Inside that space lies wisdom. That's why inner peace is not some soft luxury. It's survival. A chaotic world will constantly try to pull you into emotional disorder. People project their fears onto you. Media profits from your anxiety. Toxic environments normalize stress until exhaustion feels normal. You must consciously resist that. Protect your mind. Not everything deserves emotional access to you. Some battles are distractions. Some arguments are traps. Some negativity exists only to drain your spirit. Strong people know when to disengage. Not because they're afraid. Because peace matters more than proving a point to emotionally reckless people. That's maturity. And understand this carefully. Being calm does not mean tolerating disrespect. It does not mean becoming passive. It does not mean ignoring problems. It means responding intentionally instead of emotionally. There's a difference. Weak people react impulsively. Strong people respond consciously. One is controlled by emotion. The other controls emotion. And the difference between those two mindsets shapes entire lives. A calm mind sees solutions panic cannot see. When everybody else is overwhelmed, the calm person notices details others miss, thinks clearly, acts wisely. That's why calmness becomes an advantage, especially in difficult times. Anybody can appear stable when life is easy. But who are you when uncertainty arrives? Who are you when plans fail, when people betray you, when life becomes unpredictable? That's where real character appears. Panic reveals weakness. Calmness reveals strength. And maybe your greatest rebellion in this chaotic world is refusing to become emotionally consumed by it, refusing to let fear dominate your thinking, refusing to let negativity poison your spirit. Because eventually you realize something important. The world may remain chaotic forever. There will always be noise, always be fear, always be uncertainty. But your inner state does not have to mirror external madness. You can become grounded even when the world shakes. That's freedom. Not controlling every circumstance. Controlling yourself despite the circumstances. And maybe people won't understand your calmness at first. Emotionally reactive people often mistake calmness for weakness because they only recognize loud reactions as strength. But storms are loud too. That doesn't make them powerful forever. The ocean beneath the storm remains deep and steady. Become like that. Deep, grounded, controlled. Because in a world constantly panicking, the calmest mind becomes the strongest one in the room. And when everybody else loses themselves in fear, you become the peace they cannot find within themselves.